Okay. Well, welcome everybody and happy new year and welcome to the first 2025 regular meeting of the Needham Historical Commission. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, meetings of public bodies may be conducted virtually provided that adequate access is provided to the public. And this meeting is available on Zoom and a recording will be available as well. And because this is a recorded meeting, all votes will be taken by roll call. Did I get everything?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, first item of business, the minutes of the November meeting. Did anybody have any comments or changes?
I had one minor comment. I don't know if it's worth changing or not, but there was a piece in there about how we were talking about Salem, I believe, and their process for houses that came up and trying to get the B forms done kind of expeditiously. And it mentioned that the town or they were had attorneys on retainer. They're not attorneys.
Oh.
They're whoever the group like we had hired previously. I'm not even sure what you call that consultant, but they're
Historic preservation consultant.
yeah.
Should we just change
So
the word?
change lawyers on retainer to historic preservation consultant. Consultants. In the action items, Joe's name is Joe Prondak is spelled incorrectly. It doesn't have a C. And the action items here, yeah, all at the end.
Oh.
It's DAK.
Eh?
Does anybody have anything else? Okay, with those amendments, do I hear a motion to accept the minutes of the November 18th, 2024 meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, take a vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
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 Joe?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, 7 to 6 unanimous. It's always the easy part. Okay. Okay, as you know, we have been trying to schedule, we've been seeking to schedule a meeting with Joe Prondak, the building commissioner, because we have not yet had a chance to meet him or have a conversation with him. He replied that he has a standing commitment on Mondays and Thursdays, so he was not able to set a date. So do we have an alternative? Anybody want to suggest an alternative? We can either have a small number, which would be 3 or fewer, a non-quorum group, meet with him at a time that's more convenient for him during the week. We could try to meet a different night. I know there is a Tuesday coming up in the spring because of town meetings, so maybe, he might be available then. We can move our posted meeting to another night, but that messes everybody's schedules up.
Well, as a retired person, I have a little more flexibility. I don't know how other people are. But for the convenience of our building inspector for one time, I would be open to maybe, move a meeting earlier in the day. I don't know if he can help.
We could make an appointment with him, as long as it's not a quorum number, because it would be an official meeting.
Well, we could make it a posted meeting. And
Why would we want it to be?
We can make it.
Because it would be hard to necessarily get people on the schedule.
Now, what's our objective in meeting him?
Just we haven't met him yet. He was new last year. He's been in the job for about a year and a half, I guess, at this point. And since we have a lot of interests in common, especially when there is a demolition request or preservation request, it's just good to get on the same page.
Well,
And we haven't really had the chance yet to do that.
He's the initiator of the process for the demolition delay. It doesn't start, the process doesn't start and someone makes a request for a demolition permit. And then so there's been a lot of, sometimes, in the past, sometimes someone's just doing a small renovation. You know, addition, you know, and it says demolish and rebuild. And, you know, so there's a whole dialogue and process.
Yeah, it's not the demolition part so much as I think the preservation part. You know, they go hand in hand, but according to the bylaw, you know, it's not that clear, so we just wanted to.
Will we have business with him that we'll wanna address such that it would be required for, or good? for
No,
all of us
not
to
at
be
this
there?
point,
Okay.
not at this point, it's mostly just, essentially a meet and greet, just to get, you know, just to be familiar with each other. You
So
know,
no business on the table.
Well, it'd be
no
tough-
business on the table currently, just to let them know sort of what we're
Okay.
thinking and how we work and.
Generically, you could call it business, because it wouldn't just be,
But we're not gonna
But it's
say
not a
like,
specific-
it's not like we
specific
wanna
house.
re-talk about a process.
Yeah, it's not a
or-
specific
Well, it is-
case.
Yeah, but that is, we want to talk about the process generically, it wouldn't be in response to someone making a request for demolition.
Yeah,
So we want to just be able to have a conversation, so the first time that happens,
Yeah.
he knows what to do, and we know what he's gonna do.
so do you want me to try and get on his schedule, probably an afternoon or something, and then let you know what it is and. See how many people can come and then just post that, as long as we do that, you know, within, I think we have 3 business days, right?
I mean, did I misspeak? It may not be a little bit, you know,
If does that
time, is
work
that?
for people? If we did that, just try and pick an afternoon. And, you know, when it's convenient for them, and then if it is more than 3, post it as an official meeting.
That works for me.
Yeah, the alternative is to wait until, I think it's May. We have a Tuesday meeting in the spring because of town meeting schedule. We avoid Mondays in May. So that would be the alternative. If he's available on that Tuesday, we could do it in our regular meeting. Anybody have a preference?
I'd love to be a part of it, but I don't schedule around me. I probably have some of the more restrictions than others, so I think if it works for others and I can come, great, but if not, then I understand and. I'm
Just so
fine.
you wouldn't feel excluded, because, you know, because we did it at a off-schedule time
Well,
for,
why don't I aim for that Tuesday? It's only a couple months from now. Cause that's our regular meeting night for that month. And if that doesn't work for him, then I'll say, yeah, Tuesday, May, whatever it is, or, you know, let me know an afternoon, say next month, so we have enough lead time.
he might not like that because he probably has to be at town meeting, you know, sitting there,
So
sitting
gotta
in the
stay
back
again
there,
for-
right?
yeah. Come in for another night. Yeah, we'll see what works for him, but that gives us 2 alternatives that, that should at least be able to gather in sort of most of you.
Mhm.
Okay, sounds good.
It sounds good.
So as of now, as of this moment, the Attorney General has not yet given final approval on the local historic district bylaw. There's still some issues that he's going over with town council and the town clerk. And if you wouldn't mind, Miles, if you give us an update?
So it's currently on hold and town council is working with the town clerk's office with bandwidth. I know they're having with the special election right now.
Yeah.
They had 2 concerns, which was. I'm not sure of the cause of why, but there was a concern of whether the map was distributed to town meeting members or not. It was in the warrant. And whether the final report of the Historic District Commission or the Single Parcel Historic District Study Committee was provided to town meeting members. We believe that it was effectively provided by being posted publicly on the website, and that website was linked in the FAQs to town meeting members as well. So we'll see what they have to say about that, but it's not something I would consider myself terribly worried about. We do believe town meeting members were adequately informed hopefully to the AG's expectations.
So it just takes some time.
Does town
to
council
sort out.
know that maybe the state historical commission could be a helpful resource, maybe in navigating this, because they've done it many times and.
I don't think it's not a content issue. I think it's a process issue, right?
That
Yeah,
is my
so-
understanding.
Yeah, so there's not much they could do because
She
they
must
weren't
be-
involved in the actual warrant, the posting the warrant seems to be the issue more than the content. Um,
And not to say the warrant wasn't published properly, I think it's just maybe a miscommunication between the town and the AG's office and letting them know how we did things.
So a couple additional things, I have been talking to our friends on Warren Street. A couple of them are interested in creating a Warren Street Historic District. So I have sent them the material, I've sent them the summary of the bylaw and a copy of the flow chart, and when they have a chance to talk to the neighbors and start getting everybody together, we'll hear more, we'll let you, we'll fill you in, but I think the next step would be a neighborhood meeting with them, so several of us meet with them or have them come here to discuss what the process is, what it involves, what it doesn't involve, and what they are, what they would be, what they would be doing if they wanted to do this, because then we would need, assuming approval of our bylaw, then we would need to go to the select board, create a study committee and the whole process, and they would have to be involved in that.
But potentially, it would potentially go to the Historic District Committee to take that up.
Yeah,
I think that's great, because, I think we should move on as soon as possible. To keep the momentum,
mhm,
and keep it fresh on people's minds.
Yeah.
Town meeting just did it, as well, so,
yeah, and we have talked about also about, a story in the Observer. And as soon as we have notification,
and we wanna get.
we'll go with that too.
I had a conversation with, the Graves and, so
Okay, so-
I'm glad they spoke up and let's, with their momentum before the neighborhood gets too old,
Yeah,
um.
Can I ask a point of information,
Sure.
not being that familiar with the
Mhm.
process? If more than one homeowner is interested, but they're not contiguous, can you still form a historic district?
yes. Preferably you want a chunk.
Yep.
That entire block with one exception is all original. So I could see easily, having that missing tooth, even if all the other neighbors were agreeable. But yes, you can have
Non-contiguous.
Swiss cheese districts, yes.
Okay, all right.
And even if there was,
MHC doesn't love them, but it's better
Yeah,
than having
just
no
curious.
districts.
Yeah, I agree. I just didn't know. if you
Or
could.
trying to set up 14 single house districts on the same block.
What's the advantage of having a historic district as such?
Oh.
Historic district bylaw, it's a beautiful thing. Unlike the demo delay bylaw, which allows for a 6-month, essentially 6-month moratorium, which is hopefully a negotiating period. This gives responsibility for certain approvals to an appointed historic district commission. So say, okay, so right now we have one designated historic district, Mill Handles House on the corner of Rosemary and Webster. Should Mo want to tear down the house or subsequent owner want to tear down the house, they would have to speak to the Historic District Commission and get their approval. Without a certificate of approval, they cannot tear down the house. So it's a much more powerful law. It's in some towns, in Newton, for example, it could be very, very rigid. You can't do a lot of things to a property. Needham's is pretty much key to demolition and major changes on facades visible from the public way. We don't put a lot of other restrictions, house color and roof type and window type and stuff like that.
Right.
But it
but
does
you can.
prevent, you can, but we,
Part of the charter of the local historic.
yeah, but we
district.
didn't define it that way.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can define it any way you want, within, certain reasons. But, we defined ours pretty much to, just govern demolition for the most part, and a couple of other, cosmetic details.
this will be an interesting process because I think, defining those rules will be, for multi-houses, multi-owners, will be
Yeah.
a lot different.
Be
than-
much more
than-
complicated than a
Mo
single,
saying, I'm just not gonna demolish my house,
yeah,
and I don't even remember all the details of the things that.
yeah, but it does. And it's not time sensitive, it's not a 6-month period, it's there until the district commission actually approves. Gives you a certificate of approval to tear your house down, it can't be torn down,
Mhm.
subject to extensive penalties, so. It is a very strong preservation tool,
Is there an appetite for that?
but for some people there, yeah, but it's also a more complex process. Where you create these, for every proposal, you essentially create a study commission, that could be it could be the existing study commission, but. You have to go through the process, you have to write a warrant to go to town meeting. Town meeting has to vote to create the district,
Mm.
so it's not arbitrary.
Mhm.
We try not to make the demo delay, the inventory process arbitrary, but honestly, we could if we wanted to, but we don't like to work that way. But this requires the cooperation of town meeting, it requires the cooperation of the homeowners, because
Yeah.
honestly, if the homeowners stand up in town meeting and say, we don't want this,
Mhm.
town meeting is never gonna approve it.
Right.
So you really are going into town meeting with the homeowners behind you saying, please do this.
You need to
So-
know that in advance.
Yeah, so
Town meeting, we didn't
it's
know,
a
we
drawn out
presented it.
process.
It was voted on for this time, town meeting had to vote the 2 parts of the process, they had to vote the bylaw. And then they had to vote for the local historic district, specifically to be Mohandel's house.
Going
Because it was-
forward, you're
because
just
it was
voting on the
bylaw.
properties.
Because it was a bylaw change and it was also zoning. It required a 2/3 vote. It was a pretty easy discussion on the floor. People felt like if you're doing this, you're not by choice. It's a way to preserve your own house.
Mhm.
They said, fine, do that, and I think, there'll be, again, I think it'll get a little more complicated, but not so much. Because when they say a whole neighbor's coming forth, and is there no one disagreeing, no one's having it imposed upon them? Cause if there is a historic house on the block that doesn't wanna do it, we know we can skip them.
We can
So,
exclude it, yeah.
and even though, and so it could be the Swiss cheese, it could be one of the oldest houses in the neighborhood, and they could say, we don't wanna be a part of it. So we could skip them and still present it as unanimous.
But what it allows is this essentially preservation in perpetuity. Unless there is, there are exceptions for hardship and disaster and stuff like that, but just for sort of sell your house for renovation. It's a
I get calls all the time now.
pretty good.
Would you like to sell your house? I said, sure, how much you offering? And they always say, well, what do you have in mind? So,
3 million.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Oh, yeah, I've had the old.
And they hang up
They
really
say,
quickly.
well, we offer you more than market value. Oh, really? Well, how much is that? Well, what,
Do you have a number in mind? They always say, do you have a
Yeah,
number in
right.
I
mind?
also then asked them, do you know who I am? Have you Googled me? Do you understand that, why are you interested in this house? And mine's a multifamily,
Right.
but it's not zoned for that. So, you don't get to do that, right, for one. Two, it's an old house, right?
Yeah.
And this, I'm sort of a preservationist. Have you looked at, have you done that research?
No, the answer is no. It's hard to do research from China.
That's right.
Wherever it is.
Okay, and we also talked about having Jen Darty at the Mass Historical Commission come to talk to us about both the local historic district bylaw and the demolition delay bylaw, especially if we want to talk about or consider making changes to that. She is coming to our February meeting. So we'll talk to her about that in February.
And who is she again? Sorry.
She is our rep to the Mass Historical Commission.
Oh, cool.
She's there, and she has an official
Right, you mentioned that in.
official position, but I forget off the top of my head. Okay, so. Cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
so we'll get that going. She sent me, their model bylaw, which I will send around, as well as a copy of ours, so you can see sort of how they differ. They differ a lot, so if we did want to pursue a change in our bylaw, it would be a big process. Once we decide we want to go forward with it, then we talk to town council, the select board, it'll be another warrant issue, like the historic district bylaw. Okay. Now, The Needham History Center has submitted a request to the CPC for funding for storage upgrade, and part of that process is the CPC needs a vote from the Historical Commission that the assets in question are resources for the history, culture, and what's the
Like artifacts.
historical, cultural, and archaeological significance to the history of the town of Needham. Since obviously I'm the petitioner, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote, and we did have a long discussion over whether I should leave or not, but I am gonna leave and go across the hall. So I am going to turn the meeting over to Leah. The motion is in your agenda. Before I do step out, does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
Yep.
Could you, just tell us what the request is and
Okay, oh, right.
what are the,
Yeah,
how does it interest the historical commission?
The request is for shelving primarily. It's also some dehumidification. An integrated dehumidifier structure, but
It's the dehumidification, that's the biggest issue.
that's actually not the issue. I mean, that's part of then the other half of the proposal, the request is for shelving. And while shelving per se doesn't fall into preservation, the conditions of storage are such that as we rebox the artifacts into archival storage containers, they take a lot more space than the various boxes and stuff that things were stuffed into before. And the boxes have now started to fill all the aisles, which means we can't meet the preservation mandate of the Department of Interior has a long document, preservation standards, and all CPC requests for historic preservation have to move in the direction of, acquiring these standards. And we can no longer meet the standard of access, because when boxes, aisles, filled with boxes, you can't get to most of them, and they're high and deep. We can't meet the standard of access, we can't meet the standard of monitoring, because the routine spot checks for insects and deterioration that you would normally do, you can't do. And you also can't meet the requirement for access for the public, because we can't reach a lot of our artifacts anymore in order to make them available to people.
So this is not just about storage, but it's about.
No, it's a preservation, it's a
about
preservation
putting
project.
things in, and it's usable, and it's also about compliance.
It's about compliance,
So-
it's about maintaining
Accessibility.
standards of preservation, it's about accessibility, it's about public benefit. Because the point of those collections is to make that information available to the public, and if we can't get to them, we can't do that. So, yeah, it's not the shelves themselves, it's what the shelves let us do. Pretty much.
But the idea is just that you would take the storage containers and now have appropriate shelving to put the storage containers on, so you clear up your aisles again. So you're not doing anything to the center itself to address this accessibility. It's merely just allowing you to stack stuff.
Yeah, right now, with the library and the high school renovations, we got a lot of their cast off shelving, which was great. At the time, it saved us a huge amount of money, it let us set up, but those shelves could only hold the bookshelves, the library bookshelves. So they can only hold we have two sort of, the mainly used containers are textile boxes, which are 30 inches wide. And these other boxes that are essentially the size and shape of bankers boxes. We can only get 2 of each kind on each shelf. And we've maxed out all the ones we can reach. The new shelving, because we're getting basically, U-line heavy duty shelving, which comes in, all sorts of incremental sizes, will be sized to fit the boxes, which means we can get, depending on which range you're in, 8 to 12 boxes per shelf, and then 5 shelves high. So that's a huge volume
Mhm.
of storage compared to, the current ones we
And
have.
in the presentation of the CPC last week, of which I was involved because I'm on the CPC as well. You also showed certain storage for framed things that
Yeah.
are just sitting on the floor now. Up against each other.
Right now, framed works are just stacked against the wall and they're starting to slump, and part of the furniture we'd be purchasing are, uprights. Essentially, they're actually box storage bins. Which are just, with partitions, and then we can range them through there with buffers between them to keep them from slumping and bending.
I mean, the presentation was very clear how it would improve storage and accessibility for the center. It didn't seem to be any doubt.
Actually.
It's not just frivolous.
No. And
Shelving
it met
request.
the
How dare you.
eligibility requirements for CPC.
I actually
funding.
It's not like
I have-
fancy shelving, they're not.
Belt and
So it's a
suspenders I
very
have,
nice
because I
presentation.
brought 7 copies in case, um. In case the PowerPoint didn't work, so if you guys want to take a
Sure,
quick look,
thanks.
it's 2 copies. So, yeah, you can see on the second.
I've seen it live.
I've seen it and seen it.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen it live.
Page 2 and 3, you'll see the photographs. Photographs of storage, and page 4, we've got some photos of the storage furniture that we're looking at purchasing. And also the list of the Department of Interior standards.
So
So,
you ask for enough money to be able to have additional continued storage, and not just run out in 6 months after doing this?
yes, thank you. Well, this will fill the room, which means, and for this project, we're covered. But yeah, so for the Department of Interior, provide storage space large enough for existing museum collections, we're not doing that right now. Plan to accommodate space for growth, not doing that. Organized to ensure safe movement of staff and objects and facilitate safe access to all objects, you're not doing that. House museum collections in appropriate containers, we are doing that. And materials and methods to protect the collections from damage.
So these are the things that you need to meet.
These
you're saying, and
are the, for
you
objects.
can't meet them at the moment.
And we can't meet them
Got
at the
it,
moment,
got it.
and this project will move us to that, toward that standard.
Okay, cool.
Okay, does anybody else, any other questions?
Yeah,
was
they're
very
encouraged.
I just happened to use the same notebook.
So Madam Chair, just real quick, in appointing Leah to be the interim chair, it just needs to be noted that everyone here does not object to that.
Oh,
So you
okay.
have to ask for objections, and if you hear them, then.
Do we need to
it's
vote,
fine.
or
No,
just-
only if there's
Okay.
an objection.
Does anyone object to Leah Polkowicz Cordy, our vice chair, as chairing this part of the meeting? No, no objections, thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
I mean, is it Leah with an
Go
E?
far for it.
I'm just gonna.
I don't know if I approve.
My parents gave it to me. I didn't pick it.
Frivolous extra letters.
It's not frivolous, I like it. Anyway, is there any further discussion that we want to have prior to asking for a motion? I feel like.
I mean, the only question I have is, I assume that there was market research done on like the type of shelving and the cost and blah, 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 like 55 grand for shelving sounds a little bananas, but what do I know? So is that part of our job? Is
That's
to
more a
dis-
job for the CPC.
Okay,
to
okay.
determine, whether the
Is
funding
this
is
the
appropriate.
appropriate
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
And, okay,
Yeah.
And as our representative for CPC, the last piece for CPC approval is just to come to us and get our approval,
A
or?
little odd to me, but I'm, first year on the CPC, so I don't know what their procedures are totally, but they want the historical commission to state that it's the purpose is for preserving, that it meets that the items in the history center meet those goals that are set out in the motion.
Marshall, can you repeat that again?
For the purpose of,
CPC wants to be satisfied that it meets, what's the vote language? It's in here somewhere, I think. The end of the,
that the artifacts and
Yeah,
assets of the Needham History
right.
Center, museum or resources.
Oh,
of
okay.
historical,
Yeah.
cultural, okay, so you have
Yep.
it.
So I have it.
yeah,
in here.
yeah, they want to be satisfied that those standards are met,
Okay.
or
Thank
that we
you.
agree that those, you know, being met.
Any other questions? Concerns?
So are we asking for a certain dollar amount, or are we
No.
asking,
It just,
can
if
we
you go-
do this thing?
The motion is that the artifacts and assets of the Needham History Center and Museum are resources of historical, cultural, and or archaeological significance to the history of the town of Needham.
Well, that's easy to answer.
Right, right. So that's all,
That's
that's all I want to know. Because part of
I
the,
didn't mean to make it.
part of the funding for historic preservation is for this purpose.
So I'd like to make a motion that we support, that language,
Well,
You know-
let Leah, I think. was-
Great, is that I need to.
You
ask-
ask for a motion,
I
and
asked
for a
Jeff would be
motion.
appropriate
Okay.
to provide
Can
that.
you say these words for the motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you have
Do you
them?
have them?
Jeff?
And the thing move, or that word is motion.
Yeah, moved.
I will move that we agree that the conditions of storage of our cargo boxes take up, wait a minute.
No.
No,
No.
that the artifacts and assets of the.
Yes, yes, the artifacts and assets of the historic center are resources of historical, cultural, and archaeological significance to the history of the town of Needham.
Seconded.
Thank you.
So now we can do our roll call vote.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Max. Mark,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Jeff,
Aye.
Deborah,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes,
Joe, sorry.
yes.
And vice chair, acting chair says yes. Right, it's not
Right,
even,
yeah.
it's not any of the typical things, it's just one didn't vote.
Yeah.
Recuse. Guess you could call it an abstention,
Yeah, and one abstained,
yes.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know, how would you document that? Would be one
One
recused,
abstain?
one
Or-
recused,
One recusal.
but you weren't part of the meeting, so you wouldn't even.
Yes, because she's already got that. Okay, went pretty well.
Thank you.
The minutes have to reflect that you left the room and there was, at the time, there was
Mhm.
one less person and then document that you returned and we're back to,
Oh, do we have?
Yeah,
to
you
say
actually do
return
have to
now?
say that I handed the meeting over to Leah.
Yep. And that you asked if there were any
And that
objections.
Leah has to hand it back to me.
I was just about to ask that.
Okay.
Any objections to me handing the meeting back over to Gloria?
No.
No, no.
It is all yours, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Around 6:30 or so, I sent you guys a file from WeTransfer via WeTransfer of the inventory sheets. WeTransfer, you should be able to just click and download. You don't need to like sign in or anything like that. It should just let you do it. But if there's a problem, let me know. So what you're holding now is just an example of, it's not the whole database, it's just an example, but I sent the whole thing was 12 pages, and I didn't see the need to. Since you're getting electronically, I didn't see the need to print it out in its entirety. But basically, for every inventory record, there's a B4 number or there's a form number, and the B forms are houses. And, as you go down the list, you've got 125 on the list right now, with some missing. But so 125 B numbers, then there are certain numbers, C numbers, which is the cemetery, D numbers, which are, public properties like bridges. No, F is the bridges, and D is things like, the town hall historic district and other public properties like that, so you'll see as you go through the list. But each form, each B form has the complete information as, you know, to the extent it's known about each property. And you got all those files in a folder, but the summary form, the spreadsheet, just so you can sort it out and figure out what is what. It has the B form number, or the form number. First column, the date built, the name of the property, its address. Old and new, there were two inventories, Heritage 1 and Heritage 2, so. This just tells you if it's on the old list or the new list, most of you don't actually need to know that. Any additional comments? For example, for 6 and 8, the B form is missing. For B23, the house was demolished. So if there's additional information like that, that's added in the comments section. And then there are the sort forms. This is Excel, which means you can sort. It also means you can mess up. If you want to find it by street, you can sort by, the street sort and find all the houses on Dedham Avenue, for example. Or if you want to find family names, like all the McIntosh houses, you can sort by property name. If you want to sort, because this is also Excel and it sorts in binary, if you want to sort by form number, you can't just sort by that first column where you'll get B1, B10, B11, B12, B2, B20, B20.
Oh.
So if you, then you have to do a 2-level sort, form sort, and then form number sort, and that'll give you the correct order. But so there's sort forms. This, of course, is Excel. If you don't select all of the columns before you sort, it will randomize. I will send you a new copy. I've done that. I just did that to my member list, so it happens. And then my poor treasurer verified all of my membership information because I totally randomized my member list. So if you have any trouble accessing this or have any questions, just let me know, but I sent it to you this evening, so you may not even have seen it yet. WeTransfer is a pretty easy tool to use. You just click and download. But this way, everybody now has a copy of the inventory. And this is much better than the good old days when we had to Xerox. Xerox the
Well, that little
forms.
book sounded nice. I don't know.
Oh, no, it was a big, and that's probably how some of these got lost, because they just got, stuck together, not Xerox. And 12 copies, 12 generations of copy later. But that way, all of us have, now, so whenever you say like house number such and such, B52, you can now go right to that form and see what B52 is, where it is, what's important about it, and that sort of thing.
Is there a unique B form for every house?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you can actually see the complete B form if you,
Yep, the B4, I sent you a
Content.
folder, with all the B
oh,
forms as
I
well.
see. Okay.
Yeah, so the spreadsheet is the spreadsheet, which is
Right.
basically the index.
But there's another,
And then there's a folder, that's why I just, because WeTransfer handles, multi-gigabyte transfers.
so there's another folder where we can actually see the contents.
So
of
the
B
email
form.
should give you the link to both the Excel spreadsheet and the folder with all the files. Yes, if you want to look at a specific one, other than Zohar's house, which I've lost the folder, the file for. And one other, B6 and B8 for some reason are missing, but other than that, we have the other 123. Plus, in some cases, we've got the actually, for all of the National Register properties, we put the National Register nomination papers in there as well. And then the ones that I could find for, you know, the cemetery and Echo Bridge and the things that aren't technically on the list.
Well, is a national register designation a nice thing, but it doesn't do much for
Exactly,
president, okay.
yeah.
Well, what
Yes.
about maps? Maps is historical.
No, it's actually,
That doesn't do
National
anything either?
Register is a ladder. You have to be, to get onto the state inventory of historic places, you first have to be on the town inventory of historic places, so that's what our B forms are. It goes to the state, and once it's on the state inventory of historic places, you could petition to have it on the National Register. So you can't go from, you know, sort of 0 to 60, you have to go up the string. Unfortunately, unless public money has been spent in maintaining or renovating the property, there is essentially no protection on the National Register. It's just an honorary designation. It conveys importance, but so for public properties, you know, town hall and the town common are National Register properties. Public money has been spent on those. But, you know, Jeff's house, Zohar's house, Leah's house,
I mean, it'd be great, you want to spend some money on the house.
I know. Are not
It's
eligible
a
for
process, there are restrictions, and they're on paper, there are, resources that, are not available. There was no money, there's no.
Yeah, there's- yeah.
Give me the number for this old house.
This old,
Yeah, unless you get this whole
Reagan-
house.
Reagan
That's
era.
also
You still
private,
have to pay
that's
for it,
private money. I know, you do.
by the way.
Yeah.
I've looked
It's
into
not-
it.
it's not free.
That's
not.
And actually,
Nothing's free.
I heard from a friend who worked, you know, did some consulting for them. You know, you pay for it, you tell them what your budget is, right?
Yeah,
And they come in and of course, they have to find the most expensive solution to problems that they run into. And a lot of people, you know, services provide in-kind services, you get to,
Yeah.
you know, insulation or something like
Yeah,
that.
because they want to be seen.
And when they're all done, that's in-kind donations that you have to pay taxes on.
right.
So all of a sudden you get hit
I know, it's a-
with a bill
yeah.
beyond what you had to pay the
It's not a
contractor.
free deal.
I think,
A lot of public scrutiny, but it's not free.
yeah. I was gonna say, I think where one interesting thing of where some of these designations might start to come to play a little bit more is that conversation we started last week or last meeting about the energy code, stretch code, and historic houses, because it's not official yet. But, some folks in my firm are tapped into, other things that are going on, and there is some, I don't know if it's officially an amendment, but there's some language that's going to be hopefully adopted soon that clarifies what historic buildings need to comply with and historic homes and commercial properties need to comply with as far as making renovations to their houses, because there has been a lot of problems lately about these homes needing to come up to the stretch energy code, and that's really not what the purpose of the code was. So they are clarifying some of that language. And there is, I know I promised you I would send you something and I haven't yet. There is some vague language in there right now that if your home is deemed historic, then you don't need to comply with certain portions of the stretch energy code. So the more of these designations you have, the better argument you have for if you were going to make some adjustments to your house, particularly when it comes to how much insulation you can provide or a heating system or something like that, because we all know some of our old houses just can't take some of this. We'd love to do it, but they just can't because they can't do it structurally or the thickness of the walls or whatnot. So that is one thing that would be interesting. If we have more houses on the registry, it could actually be beneficial
That could be
For-
actually a selling point.
Yeah.
You know, for people.
potentially.
However, I talked to Joe, because I have a renovation project before that you know, you know, and I wanna knock down and rebuild, you know, probably a third of the house.
Mhm.
And my architects were looking at, you know, well, we have to be,
Your house?
no,
Oh, I was gonna say, 'cause
the Kingsbury house.
okay,
You know,
Yeah, next door.
the next door. You know, and so they're saying either we have to keep it to below 1,000 square feet. Or, you know, the whole other, 2,000 square feet house has to comply. And what do we do? Well, let's see, what's the historic exemption? So I went and talked to Joe. Okay, Joe said, he says, oh, you're on, I exempt that, anything, and he does, I don't, I said, do you need to go to historic commission? Oh, no, it doesn't have to, anything that's historic. He's just, if I got the opportunity to do it, there's no language in the rules that tells me how I have to define it. Or what I have to do, they say I'm the one who's empowered to make the decision,
As the
so,
owner.
as the building inspector.
Oh.
He was, so I was like, thank you, thank you. We were talking about this, Joe, last, meeting, and, so, our building, commissioner is very sympathetic.
There are, and have been exceptions made for historic properties for public projects. This one being one. Because, there are. For example, the main staircase from the first floor to the second floor does not meet code because instead of being 7 inches up and 11 inches on the treads, it's 7 inches up and 10 5/8 inches on the treads.
That's still not bad. A lot are 6
Oh,
inches and.
Yeah, yeah,
9
no,
inches
but,
on-
but that had to go, that had a specific exemption had to be gotten for that on the basis of the fact that it was an existing historic structure. And, and because there was adequate additional egress capacity to, to compensate for it. So there are ways around it, but there are also ways of maintaining the integrity of historic structures and still meeting the codes, but the stretch code is a much more thorough, much bigger, a bigger bucket than previously, so it's gonna require some additional.
Right, and it's affecting homes. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's the biggest thing is that
Yeah.
the prior changes to the stretch code didn't affect single family houses very much, and now this one
Yeah.
very much does.
You
So
know-
it's skipping forward a whole bunch.
It's part of the discussion that's coming up in the large house, review committee.
Yeah.
Because a situation can happen where, I mean, trying to save houses. Now, if there's a house without a historic, in any manner, it is not historic. Then if someone's doing, an addition that's more than 50%. Of it, or 1,000 square feet, they have to bring the whole other part of the house up to existing stretch code. And if those courthouses were built with big 2x4s, it's not gonna happen unless you add another, another interior wall. Or exterior wall, right, so it's just saying, well, that house is gone. No one's gonna do that, and so there's some perfectly good houses that could get knocked down when someone didn't want to, just because of this new stretch code.
Well, I think this was also conceived of as essentially new construction and, law of unintended consequences. To drag in all these other
Well, I think it's the
properties.
in-between houses that are getting caught because now they are amending the language to protect the truly historic homes. Because they're certainly not trying to get those knocked down.
Yeah.
Because they recognize that, but there is that kind of in between, a home from
40s,
the
30s, 40s.
70s, 80s even that was perfectly fine, but can't, was still built with 2x4s.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're not gonna add a second row of studs even though they could.
That's at least one thing we don't have. One thing we don't have.
Right, like that doesn't affect us
non-historic.
in particular, but.
Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
Did you ever hear back about the Joshua Lewis house?
Not a word.
Nothing, huh?
Nothing,
Crickets.
crickets. No, not a word. The house is not yet sold, but they have not yet made more of a concerted effort to sell it as land. I think, this, the asking price, nobody's gonna buy, it's listed at 2.7, and nobody's gonna buy that to tear down. It is also in a 1 acre zone, which means it can't be subdivided. It's not large enough to subdivide, so, we've got that in our favor, and hopefully, there have been people looking at it who want the historic house, so, hopefully that's gonna happen,
But they never answered your letter.
but they never answered. They're also selling off parts of the collection, so
Mm.
I have thoughts,
Mhm.
but I will not express it publicly.
I have a question, Gloria, if you have a second. To change gears a little bit, if I can, the vote that's coming up for all of the development, MBTA development. And I see on the listing here, but Needham Heights there, the Highland, the Avery Square. What part, that's the old age restricted housing, correct, across from Trader Joe's?
Yeah,
What part is that? It's just, is the whole building historic?
building's not historic, it's not listed. The brick one, that used to be the Carter,
Alberts, yeah.
used to be Carter's, that was built in 1951 or two.
Yeah, I was just looking on the inventory list. There's Avery Square Heights Common. That's not it? At
No,
20
Avery Square, that's actually the common across the street. In front of the train station.
Oh, with the
Heights Common is the actual
the
common,
little
with the
park.
flagpole and the tree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Avery Square
no, the Carter property, well,
That's not in our inventory.
/Avery /Kindred now, who the hell knows who owns that property, is not on the list, and that would be the redeveloped property.
Do we know if any properties in the proposed zones are on our inventory? I was just kind of trying to scroll through them now.
I don't think so, there are none that come to mind, but it wouldn't surprise me along the Heights part of the corridor, if there are a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, there are none of them popped out at me.
Unfortunately, it doesn't extend out with Pleasant Street, does it?
No,
No,
no, because then my neighbors should be.
okay, anything else? All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
No. Second?
Stay here all
Guys
night.
wanna keep going?
Yeah.
Second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, Jeff,
Aye.
Bill Hart. Megan. Yeah. Marshall,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Joe,
All right.
chair votes yes. Okay.